Poor widow dumped by her kids after her husband's funeral. But then she finds this. Poor widow dumped by her kids right after her husband's funeral. But then she finds this. The door shut with a dry slam that echoed in Marjorie's chest like a gunshot. She had just buried the love of her life, and that same day, she also lost her children. Kicked out of her own home with only one suitcase in her hands, she thought she had lost everything until she discovered something hidden that would change the destiny of her entire family. If you too believe that family should be sacred and that loyalty is a value that should never die, subscribe now to Momentos Escritos. You won't want to miss a second of the outcome of this shocking story and how life takes unexpected turns. And please leave us a comment telling us what city in the world you're tuning in from today. Your support means a lot to us. The front door closed with a dry slam that resonated in Marjorie's chest like a gunshot. Cherie watched her from the porch, arms crossed, with an expression Marjorie had never seen on her before. It was a mix of contempt and triumph. Beside her, her brother Brendan stood silent, staring at the lawn, unable to face his mother's tear-filled eyes. "Cherie, please," Marjorie pleaded, her voice breaking. "Your father's body isn't even resting yet. What is this? Where am I supposed to go?" Her trembling hand clung to the brown suitcase, the only thing they allowed her to take. Cherie let out a short, bitter laugh. "That's your problem, Mum, not ours. You're a grown woman now. Brendan and I have plans for this property." The El Paso sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. But Marjorie only felt the ice emanating from her own children. The house, her home for 4 decades, now looked like a foreign fortress. Every window, every brick reminded her of Bruce, the love of her life and the future they had planned together for their old age. A future that had just been wiped out in less than 3 hours. "Plans? What plans are you talking about?" Marjorie asked, confused. Brendan finally looked up, his eyes empty. "Mom, the house is in our names. Dad transferred it 5 years ago. You don't own anything here." The revelation hit her with the force of a slap. Bruce wouldn't have done that, leaving her unprotected, at the mercy of his children's ambition. It couldn't be true. Her Bruce wouldn't do that. He always told her she was his queen, and this house was her castle. Built with the sweat of both of them. Brendan's wife, Cassandra, Cassie, appeared in the doorway holding a glass of water, looking at Marjorie with feigned pity. "Mrs. Marjorie, please, don't make a scene. The neighbors are looking. It's better if you leave quietly." The humiliation compounded the pain of mourning. She saw Mrs. O'Malley, her neighbor of 20 years, peeking out from behind the curtain. Marjorie felt her legs give way. She leaned on the suitcase, the only support she had left in the world. The suitcase contained only a few changes of clothes, her toothbrush, and her wedding portrait. "But why?" Marjorie whispered, more to herself than to them. "Cherie, I gave you everything. Brendan, I took care of you when you were sick." Cherie rolled her eyes impatiently. "Oh, Mum, don't start with the drama. Life goes on. This house is worth a lot of money on the El Paso market. We're not going to let it go to waste with you here, old and alone. We have our own families, our own debts." It was the voice of a stranger, not the little girl she had rocked in her arms. Brendan took a step forward, but Cassie stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Brendan, let her go. She's leaving." He nodded weakly. "Mum, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is." Her son's silence was the final betrayal, deeper even than Cherie's shouting. He, her boy, the one who had always been quieter and more attached to her, was now complicit in this cruelty. Marjorie understood in that instant that she was completely alone. She turned away with broken dignity, but a glimmer of something new was born in her chest, a cold determination to survive. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break down, right there on the pavement. She grabbed the suitcase with both her wrinkled hands and began to walk down the street, aimlessly. The November wind rustled the dry leaves around her as the neighborhood lights began to turn on, one by one, illuminating a world that no longer felt like her own. As she walked, every step was an effort. Her knees, affected by arthritis, protested with every movement. The weight of the suitcase was nothing compared to the weight of the betrayal. She remembered Bruce's last few weeks. It had been quick, a sudden, fatal heart attack in his sleep. There was no time for goodbyes or warnings. Now, her children's words echoed. "The house is in our names." How could Bruce have done that to her? She felt betrayed, not only by the living, but also by the dead. Darkness was beginning to fall over the pass. The Franklin Mountains stood silhouetted like sleeping giants against the purple sky. Marjorie had never felt so small, so vulnerable. Where would she go? She was 72 years old. Her pension was minimal, barely enough for groceries, and she had always shared it with Bruce. Her children knew it. They knew she depended on that house. The roof her husband always promised would be hers until the very end. She tried to think clearly. She had a distant relative, Cousin Janice in Austin, but that was hundreds of miles away. Her only close friend, Beth, lived on the other side of town, in a small one-bedroom apartment. Could she show up there, be a burden? Pride struggled against desperation. Marjorie had always been the one to help, the one who cooked food for sick neighbors, the one who looked after her grandchildren, the same grandchildren who would now live in the house they had stolen from her. A police patrol car slowly drove past her. The officer looked at her curiously. An elderly woman alone, crying, dragging a suitcase at night. But he didn't stop. Marjorie felt a wave of invisibility. She was a shadow in her own city. She sat down at a bus stop under the yellowish light of a lamppost. She opened the suitcase for the first time. Inside, resting on her nightgown, was the small wooden box where Bruce kept his important things. Army medals, a fountain pen, and his reading glasses. Cherie hadn't even let her take the family photo album. Everything was there, 40 years of memories, now in the hands of someone who only saw the monetary value of the land. How had they become like this? Marjorie remembered Cherie as a child, a sweet girl who brought her flowers from the garden. She remembered Brendan sleeping on her chest. Where had she gone wrong? Was it the money? Was it the influence of Cassie, Brendan's wife, who always looked at the house with greedy eyes? The cold was intensifying. El Paso is a desert, and autumn nights are freezing. Marjorie hugged herself, trembling. She realized she wasn't crying for the house. She was crying for the loss of her children. The mourning for Bruce was a dull, deep ache. But this betrayal, was an open, burning wound. She knew she couldn't sit there all night. She had to make a decision. With a sigh that tore her soul, she stood up. Determined, she would go to Beth's house. Swallowing her pride, she would look for the bus that crossed the city. As she closed the suitcase, her fingers brushed against something sewn into the inner lining, something that shouldn't be there. A hard, small lump, like a key. But she decided to ignore it for now. The urgency was to find shelter before the night consumed her completely. The bus ride was a silent torture. Every jolt of the vehicle reminded her of her fragility. People got on and off, laughing, talking on the phone, living their normal lives, oblivious to the drama of the elderly woman clutching a suitcase in the back seat. Marjorie looked out the window, at the city lights, the familiar shops, the Mexican restaurants where she used to have dinner with Bruce on Sundays after Mass. Everything now seemed like a set from a life that belonged to someone else. She finally arrived at the stop near Beth's apartment complex. The building was modest, made of red brick, with exterior corridors. Marjorie climbed the 2 flights of stairs with difficulty, dragging the suitcase step by step. Each step was a reminder that she was climbing toward charity, away from the house she had helped build herself. When she reached the door of apartment 2B, she hesitated for a moment. What would she say? How to explain the failure of her own family? She knocked softly on the door. A few seconds later, the door opened and Beth appeared, a woman her age with gray hair pulled back in a bun and a housecoat. "Marjorie, what are you doing here at this hour? Did something happen?" The worry in her friend's voice was enough to break the shell Marjorie had built. She collapsed in the doorway, sobbing, unable to utter a word. Beth, without a second thought, took her arm and pulled her inside. "My God, woman, you're freezing. Come on, sit down." Beth guided her to a small sofa, covered with a knitted blanket. The apartment was warm and smelled of cinnamon and coffee. It was humble but full of life. "Now breathe. Tell me what happened. Is it about Bruce? Are you okay?" Marjorie shook her head, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her jumper. "Beth, they kicked me out." The word came out choked, full of shame. Beth frowned. "Kicked out? Who kicked you out? From where?" Marjorie looked up, her swollen eyes meeting her friend's. "Cherie and Brendan kicked me out of my own house. They said the house belongs to them, that Bruce left it to them." Incredulity crossed Beth's face, quickly followed by righteous fury. "Those ungrateful sods! How dare they? After their father's funeral? That's unheard of, Marjorie. That's beyond forgiveness." Beth stood up and paced the small living room. No, this can't stand. First thing tomorrow morning we're going to find a solicitor. You have rights, Marjorie. You're the widow. The law protects you. Marjorie weakly shook her head. I don't have money for solicitors, Beth. What little I had went to the funeral. And they say he signed the papers 5 years ago. I don't know anything about that. She felt defeated, exhausted to the bone. Beth stopped and looked at her tenderly. First, you're going to have a hot cup of tea and you're going to sleep in my bed. I'll sleep here on the sofa. We'll think about it tomorrow. But I'll tell you one thing, Marjorie. As long as I live, you won't be on the street. Those two will get what's coming to them. Life has many twists, mate. And sometimes, when it seems like all is lost, that's when we find the strength we never knew we had. Marjorie barely slept that night. She lay in Beth's bed, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building. Every creak made her jump. Her mind went over the scene in the garden again and again, Cherie's face distorted by greed, Brendan's complicit silence, and the figure of Cassie, her son's wife, watching from the door, like an orchestra conductor who already knew the end of the symphony. She remembered how Cassie always asked about the value of properties in the neighborhood. A painful memory surfaced out of nowhere. A flashback from 6 years ago. Bruce had had a health scare, angina. They were in the hospital all night. The next day, Brendan and Cassie visited them. Dad, you should think about sorting out your things, Cassie had said with feigned sweetness, just so Mum doesn't have to deal with paperwork if anything happens. Bruce, still weak, had smiled. Don't worry, love. Marjorie will always be looked after. She's my priority. Was it then? Was it in that moment of weakness that they convinced him to sign? Marjorie tossed and turned in bed. She felt sick. Bruce was never good with paperwork. He was a man of his word, a carpenter who trusted people. Brendan had managed his finances since he retired. Had he blindly trusted his son? Did they trick him into signing something? You just need to sign this, Dad. It's just for the taxes. Perhaps they told him. The idea was so monstrous that Marjorie had to sit up. Beth's apartment was small, and she could hear her friend's gentle breathing on the sofa in the living room. She felt guilty for being a burden. At 3 in the morning, unable to remain still, she quietly got up. She went to find her suitcase, which Beth had left next to the door. She took it to the small bathroom and closed the door carefully. She turned on the dim light above the mirror and looked at herself. She saw a frightened old woman with disheveled white hair and red eyes. You are not going to give up, Marjorie, she whispered to herself. She remembered the lump in the lining of the suitcase. With trembling hands, she searched her handbag for small sewing scissors she always carried. Carefully, she unpicked the worn satin lining. Her fingers found the object. She pulled it out. It was a key, a small, old brass key, like one for an antique drawer or a safe deposit box. It wasn't a house key. She knew every key in her home. This one was different. Next to the key was a small folded piece of paper. It was a piece of napkin from the Café del Sol, Bruce's favorite place for morning coffee. She recognized her husband's shaky handwriting, written in haste. They were just 3 words. 3 words that made no sense at the moment, but that changed everything. The first wall. Beneath it was a series of numbers that looked like a combination. Marjorie stared at the key and the note. The first wall. What could that mean? The first wall they built? The first wall of their bedroom? Confusion momentarily replaced the pain. Bruce had left her something. He knew something might happen. Suddenly, her children's words, "The house is in our names," sounded different. Maybe Bruce didn't betray her. Maybe he was trying to protect her, even from the grave. A new kind of energy coursed through her body. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was something more visceral. It was a mystery. Her husband, the man she shared 40 years with, had left her one last secret. And that secret was connected to that key and the house she had just been kicked out of. She knew with a certainty that gave her goosebumps that she had to find a way to get back inside. Meanwhile, in the house that now belonged to Cherie and Brendan, the atmosphere was not one of celebration. Cassie, Brendan's wife, paced the living room with a measuring tape. "This wall will have to go," she said loudly, more to herself than to the others. "We can open up the kitchen and make it open plan. We'll sell this for a fortune." Cherie nodded, sipping a glass of wine she had found in her father's pantry. "Exactly. Mum and her old furniture. All of this is going in the bin tomorrow." Brendan was sitting in his father's favorite armchair, an old, worn leather recliner. He felt uncomfortable. The house was too quiet without his mother. Although he had agreed to Cassie's plan, a part of him felt a knot in his stomach. "Cassie, do you think we did the right thing? We just buried Dad and Mum looks so lost." The image of his mother dragging the suitcase down the pavement wouldn't leave his mind. Cassie dropped the measuring tape onto the table with a dry thud. "Brendan, don't start. We already talked about this. Your father put you as the owner of this house years ago for a reason. He knew your mother couldn't handle money. What would she have done? Lived here until it fell apart. We have debts, Brendan. Our car loan, credit cards. This is a lifeline. Your father wanted it this way." She approached and stroked his hair, her voice becoming soft and manipulative. Cherie, who had heard the conversation, scoffed. "Oh, little brother, don't be weak now. Dad gave the house to both of us. So what? Were we going to let Mum live here for free for another 20 years? She had her life. Now it's our turn. Besides, who looked after her these past few months? Who took her to the doctor? No one. She was always independent. Well, let her stay that way." It was a cruel distortion of reality. Marjorie had always taken care of herself because she didn't want to bother them. But Brendan knew Cassie was lying. He remembered the conversation with his father. "Son, I'm making you a co-owner," Bruce had told him, "so that when I'm gone, you help your mother with the taxes, so no one takes advantage of her. This house is hers, understand? It's your mother's nest." Brendan had felt it, but he never told Cassie the second part of that conversation. His wife's greed had been stronger than his loyalty to the promise made to his father. "I'm going to check the attic, see if there's anything valuable before calling the garage sale people," Brendan said, getting up abruptly. He needed to escape Cassie's gaze and Cherie's wine breath. He walked up the stairs slowly. The attic was dark and smelled of dust and memories. He saw his old toys, his mother's Christmas ornament boxes. He felt like a thief in his own childhood home. As he moved a box, he found an old toolbox of his father's. He opened it. There were no tools inside. There was a small ledger. He opened it. The first pages were normal expenses, repairs, taxes, bills. But the last pages were different. They were a list of payments. Monthly payments to an address he didn't recognize. And next to the last entry, written in his father's handwriting, a note. For Marjorie's protection. May God forgive me. Marjorie woke up at dawn in Beth's apartment. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust in the air. She felt sore and confused. But the key and the note were safe in her housecoat pocket. Beth was already awake, brewing coffee. The smell was comforting. "Good morning, mate," Beth said softly. "Did you sleep at all?" Marjorie shook her head. "Not much, but I think Bruce left me something." She showed Beth the key and the piece of napkin, the first wall. Beth examined the note. "Bruce was always a man of secrets," she muttered, "but good secrets. He was reserved." The first wall? What could it mean? Marjorie took a sip of the hot coffee. "I was thinking all night. When we arrived in El Paso, we bought that land, and the first thing Bruce built, even before the house, was the small garden shed. He said it was the first wall of our dream." Beth's eyes lit up. "The shed, of course. Do you think there's something there?" Marjorie slowly nodded. "I don't know, but it's a start. The problem is, how do I get in? Cherie changed the gate locks months ago. She said it was for security. And now I can't exactly knock on the door." Beth sat down opposite her with determination. "You're not going to knock on the door. You're going to sneak in without them noticing." "How, Beth? I'm not a thief," Marjorie protested. "You're not a thief if you're going to get what's yours," Beth countered. "I know those people. Those two, Cherie and Brendan, are lazy, especially after a night of celebrating. They'll sleep in, and I know Cassie. The first thing she'll do is go shopping with the money she thinks she has. We have a window. Mrs. O'Malley's house, your neighbor. Her backyard backs right up against your shed, doesn't it?" Marjorie nodded. "Yes, only an old wooden fence separates it." Beth smiled. "And Mrs. O'Malley adores you. You called me from her phone 1,000 times when yours was broken. She saw what they did to you. If we explain it, I'm sure she'll let us through her house. You only need 5 minutes in that shed." The plan was risky. If Cherie or Brendan saw her, they could call the police. They could accuse her of trespassing. "I'm scared, Beth," Marjorie confessed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "More scared than last night. Last night I only lost my house. If I get caught, I'll lose my dignity." Beth took her wrinkled hands in hers. "Dignity is fighting for the truth, Marjorie. Dignity is honoring your husband's memory. If Bruce left you a message, it's because he trusted that you, and only you, could understand it. Don't let fear take this last opportunity away from you. We're going now." Her friend's determination gave her strength. Marjorie dressed in the same dark clothes from the funeral. She felt like a soldier preparing for a battle she hadn't asked for. She put the key in her trouser pocket. "All right," she finally said. "Let's go. Let's go see what wall Bruce wanted me to find." They left the apartment and took the first bus back to the neighborhood that, less than 24 hours ago, had been her home. The return journey was tense. Every stop, every new face on the bus made Marjorie's heart beat faster. When they got off, they walked along the street parallel to hers to avoid being seen from the main house. Beth, despite her own limp, walked with an urgency that propelled Marjorie. They arrived at Mrs. O'Malley's door. The elderly neighbor opened the door and immediately hugged Marjorie. "Marjorie, I saw what those demons did to you. I couldn't believe it. Please come in, come in." Beth quickly explained the plan. "We need to get into your backyard, Mrs. O'Malley. We think Bruce left something for Marjorie in the shed. Can you let us through your house?" Mrs. O'Malley didn't even hesitate. "Of course. Through the yard, through the attic, wherever you need." What an outrage, kicking out your own mother. The world is ending. The woman guided them through her impeccable kitchen to the back door. "The yard is yours. I'll be watching the street from the lounge. If I see Cherie or that son of yours come out, I'll let you know." Marjorie and Beth went out into the neighbor's backyard. Marjorie's shed was right there, just a few meters away, separated by the wooden fence. It was old, with peeling paint, exactly as she remembered it. "There it is," Marjorie whispered. Beth pointed to a section of the fence where two boards were loose. "Looks like Mrs. O'Malley's dog already did half the job. Come on." Carefully, they pulled the boards apart, creating a gap just wide enough for Marjorie to squeeze through. "I'll keep watch here," Beth said. "You go, quickly." Marjorie took a deep breath and stepped through the fence. She was back on her property, but she felt like an intruder. She crouched and ran to the shed door. It was secured with a simple, rusty padlock. She looked at the key in her hand. It was too small for that padlock. Panic began to rise. She had been wrong. The first wall wasn't the shed. She looked at the note again. The first wall and then the numbers. 14, 3, 30. A combination. She looked at the padlock. It was a combination lock, not a key lock. It was so rusty that the numbers were barely visible. With trembling hands, she tried turning the dials. 14, 3, 30. The padlock jammed. She tried again. 14, 3, 30. She pulled the shackle. With a rusty metallic screech, the padlock opened. Bruce had made it easy for her. She opened the shed door. The interior was dark and smelled of dirt and motor oil. There were gardening tools, old pots, and Bruce's old carpenter's workbench. She looked around. Where to look? The first wall. The shed had 4 walls. But she remembered. When Bruce built it, he only put up 1 brick wall, the back one. The other 3 were wood. "So it lasts," he had said. "So it supports the roof if we ever put a heavier one on." She went to the back brick wall. It was covered with shelves, holding old paint cans and jars of nails. She started moving things frantically, her hands covered in dust and cobwebs. She was looking for something out of place, a loose brick, a box. That's when she saw it. Behind a can of turpentine was a small metal box, the size of a shoebox, embedded in the wall, hidden in plain sight. And it had a lock, a small brass lock, the lock for which she had the key. While Marjorie struggled to open the box in the shed, Brendan was in the attic, holding his father's ledger. The list of payments was methodical. $200 every month for the last 5 years. The address was for a solicitor's office downtown, Graham & Associates. Why was his father paying a solicitor every month? And the note for Marjorie's protection. "May God forgive me." Forgive him for what? A dull noise came from the yard. A cat? Brendan peered through the small attic window that overlooked the backyard. He saw the shed door open. His heart skipped a beat. A thief? Already? He ran down the stairs 2 at a time, passing the lounge where Cherie and Cassie were now arguing about the paint color for the living room. "Quiet down, both of you," he hissed. "Hey, didn't you hear that?" Cherie looked at him annoyed. "Hear what? You're paranoid, Brendan. Chill out, Mum is gone." But Brendan ran towards the back door. "Someone is in the shed. I'm going to check." Cassie grabbed his arm. "Wait, what if they're armed? Call the police." But Brendan pulled free. "It's my father's shed. I'm going myself." He went out into the backyard. The morning sun hit his eyes. He walked cautiously towards the shed. Inside, Marjorie had just turned the key. The metal box opened with a soft click. Her heart was pounding so hard she was afraid it would be heard outside. She lifted the lid. Inside there was no money. There were no jewels. There was a thick manila envelope, and on top of the envelope a single photograph. It was a photo of her and Bruce the day they finished building the house. Both young, smiling, covered in paint. Tears blurred her vision. She heard footsteps outside, footsteps in the yard. Panic flooded her. It was Brendan. She heard him shout, "Who's in there?" Marjorie was paralyzed. There was nowhere to hide. The shed door burst open, flooding the place with light. Brendan stood in the doorway, blinking to adjust his sight. And then he saw her, his mother, kneeling on the dirty floor, holding an open metal box. "Mom," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and accusation. "What are you doing here? We told you to leave. Did you break in to steal?" The accusation was so absurd that Marjorie's shock turned into a cold fury. She stood up slowly, using the workbench for support. She held the manila envelope against her chest. "I'm not stealing, Brendan. I'm on my property, or at least what your father intended to be my property." Brendan saw the empty box embedded in the wall. "What's that? Did Dad hide money? Were you robbing us?" Just then, Cherie and Cassie came running in behind him, alerted by the shouting. "The old woman is back," Cherie yelled. "Mom, I warned you." "I'm calling the police right now." She pulled out her phone. Marjorie looked at them one by one. The frightened woman of the night before had disappeared. "Go ahead, Cherie. Call the police," Marjorie said, her voice firm for the first time in days. "Call them, and when they arrive, I'll show them this." She lifted the envelope. "I'll show them what your father really planned. I'll show them why he was paying a solicitor every month for 5 years. And I'll show them how you two conned me." The confidence in her voice made Cherie hesitate. She slowly lowered the phone. "What are you talking about, you crazy old woman?" Cherie spat. Marjorie looked at Brendan. "Your father didn't betray me. He was protecting me from you lot." She opened the envelope and pulled out the first sheet of paper. It wasn't a will. It was something much more powerful. It was a contract signed by Bruce and by Brendan. A contract that Brendan clearly had forgotten, or that Cassie had convinced him to ignore. The document Marjorie held trembled in her hands, but her voice was steady. "This is a life interest contract," she declared, looking directly into Brendan's eyes, who went as pale as paper. "Signed the same day that you, or rather Cassie, convinced your father to put the house in your name. Do you remember it, Brendan, or were you too busy counting the money you were going to make?" Cherie frowned. "Life interest? What the hell are you talking about? Dad gave us the house. The title is in our name." Marjorie shook her head. "Your names are on the property title, yes, but this document, prepared by Graham and Associates solicitors, gives me the legal, undeniable, and irrevocable right to live in this house, use it, and enjoy it until the day I die. You are the paper owners, but I am the owner of life here." Cassie lunged. "That's a lie. It's a fake paper." "Brendan, take it from her." But Brendan was frozen. He remembered that day. His father had taken him aside. "Sign this, son. It's to protect your mother. She doesn't understand these things. The title is yours, but the house is hers as long as she breathes. Swear it to me, Brendan. Swear you'll respect this." And he had sworn it, an oath he broke less than 24 hours after his father's death. "And there's more," Marjorie continued, pulling another document from the box. "It seems your father didn't trust your word very much, Brendan. This is a second mortgage on the property. A mortgage he himself took out a year ago, in my name. If you try to sell me out or kick me out, or if you don't pay the taxes, the bank transfers the full property to me, plus the mortgage money, $200,000. It's in an account that only I can touch." Cherie and Cassie gasped in unison. "$200,000? Cherie yelled. "That money is ours. Dad stole it from us." Marjorie looked at her with deep sadness. "Your father didn't steal anything, Cherie. Your father saved every cent of his retirement. Not for me. He saved it to protect himself from the greed he saw growing in you. He saw what you were turning into. He saw how Cassie was manipulating your brother. And he took action." The truth hit them like a concrete slab. Bruce, the quiet, hard-working man, had seen everything. He had played a long, silent game of chess against his own children. He gave them what they wanted, the house title, to keep the peace. But he made sure that title was worthless as long as Marjorie lived, and he took away the financial power for them to fight her. It was a master move executed. You can't," Cassie stammered, her face pale with rage. "We're going to have that annulled. We're going to court." Marjorie put the papers back in the envelope. "Try it, but Mr. Graham's solicitors are already notified. They have copies of everything. Bruce paid for my protection monthly. The moment I'm gone, they will oversee the sale. But as long as I breathe, Cassie, this is my house. Now," Marjorie stepped towards the shed door. "Get out of my yard. Marjorie said, her voice calm, but with a razor edge of steel. Cherie was trembling with anger. You can't do this to us. Marjorie looked at her. You did this to yourselves. Now go. I have to call a locksmith to change the locks on my house, and then I have to undo the mess you made in my living room. She walked past them with her head held high and headed for the house. Marjorie walked straight to the back door that Brendan had left open. Beth and Mrs. O'Malley watched her from the fence, crying with relief and pride. Marjorie gave them a gesture that everything was fine. She walked into her kitchen. The smell of stale wine from Cherie's glass hit her. She saw Cassie's measuring tape on the table. She calmly threw it in the rubbish bin. The sound was final. Cherie, Cassie, and Brendan followed her inside, like scolded children, but still furious. "Mom, you can't be serious," Brendan shouted. "Cassie and I have debts. We were counting on this house." Marjorie turned around in the middle of her kitchen. "Your debts are not my responsibility. Your father gave you an education. He gave you opportunities. What you did with them was your choice. But you chose greed over your family. You chose to listen to your wife instead of honoring your father's memory." "And me," Cherie shouted. "I deserve something too. I'm your daughter." "You deserve what you cultivated, Cherie. Hatred and ambition," Marjorie replied. "But your father, even knowing how you were, didn't disinherit you. When I die, this house will be sold and the money will be divided as he wanted, but not a day sooner. Until then, this is my roof, and you are not welcome here." Cassie tried one last tactic. "All right, keep it. Keep your old house, but we'll take those $200,000. Brendan, she stole it from you." Brendan looked at the ledger he was still holding. Then he looked at his mother. He saw the disappointment in her eyes, a disappointment so profound it was worse than hatred. He saw the life interest contract. He saw the mortgage. He saw his father's note. "May God forgive me." And he finally understood. His father wasn't asking for forgiveness for taking the money. He was asking for forgiveness for having a son he couldn't trust. Ashamed, Brendan dropped the ledger onto the table. "Let's go, Cassie, it's over." Cassie looked at him in disbelief. "No, I'm not leaving." He grabbed her arm, this time with force. "I said we're leaving. There's nothing here for us." He dragged her toward the front door. Cherie looked at them. Then she looked at Marjorie. Her face was a mask of pure hatred. "This won't stand, old woman. You'll regret this." She walked out and slammed the door shut. Marjorie was left alone in the silence of her house. The silence was different now. It was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of possession. She walked to Bruce's armchair and sat down. It still smelled like him. She took out the photograph she found in the box. Her and Bruce, young and full of hope. "You did well, my love," she whispered to the photo. "You took care of me. Even after you left, you took care of me." She called Beth. "Mate, you can come over, but come through the front door and bring the coffee. We have to celebrate." She hung up the phone and allowed herself to cry. But this time they weren't tears of pain or fear. They were tears of liberation. She had lost her husband, and on the same day, she had lost her children. But in the process, she had found herself. And she had discovered that Bruce's love was stronger than death and smarter than greed. The locksmith finished his work just as Beth arrived with a bag of banana bread and fresh coffee. "All done, Mrs. Marjorie," the young man said. "No one you don't want here will get back in." Marjorie paid him with a sense of relief that was almost physical. It was the first money she had spent from the account Bruce had left her, and it felt like an investment in her own peace. When the door closed and Beth and she sat down at the kitchen table, the silence returned to fill everything. But it was a different silence. It was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of strength. "Well, mate," Beth said, pouring the coffee. "How do you feel? Yesterday you were on the street and today you own the castle." Marjorie smiled weakly, looking at the measuring tape she had thrown in the bin. "I feel exhausted, Beth. I won the house, yes, but look at the cost. I lost my children. I heard my own daughter yell crazy old woman at me. I watched my son stand silent while his wife planned how to get rid of my furniture. The victory had a bitter taste, the taste of the ashes of a burnt family." Beth nodded knowingly. "The mourning you feel now isn't for Bruce. It's for them. You're mourning the children you thought you had and accepting the ones you actually have." Marjorie took the photo from the box, the one of her and Bruce young, and placed it on the refrigerator, where it had always been. "You're right. Bruce protected me from them. What kind of father has to do that? Protect a mother from her own children? It must have broken his heart." "It broke his heart, yes, but he did it," Beth affirmed. He did it because his love for you was greater than his disappointment in them. Now it's your turn to honor that love, and that means living, Marjorie. Living well, not just surviving. Marjorie looked around her kitchen, Cassie's mess, Cherie's wine glass. She stood up with a new determination. You're right. Let's start cleaning. I want this house to smell like home again, not greed. Together, the two elderly women began to clean. They threw away Cassie's notes, wiped up the wine stains, and opened the windows to let in the fresh morning air of the pass. With every cloth they wiped, Marjorie felt she was erasing not only the dirt, but the toxic presence of her children. She was reclaiming her space, inch by inch. It was painful therapy, but necessary. While cleaning the lounge, she found the ledger that Brendan had left on the table. She opened it and saw her husband's note. For Marjorie's protection, may God forgive me. She understood what Brendan had finally understood. I forgive you, my love, Marjorie whispered into the air. I forgive you for seeing the truth before I did. And I thank you. She closed the book and put it in the same drawer where Bruce kept the bills. It was no longer proof of betrayal, but a testament of love. She knew the fight wasn't over. Cherie and Cassie wouldn't give up so easily, not with $200,000 at stake. But for the first time since she received the news of Bruce's death, Marjorie felt she wasn't alone. She had Beth, she had Mrs. O'Malley, and she had her husband's protection, guiding her from beyond the grave. Meanwhile, 15 miles away, in a small rental apartment near the refinery, the atmosphere was explosive. The apartment smelled of reheated food and frustration. Useless, that's what you are, Brendan, Cassie yelled, throwing a sofa cushion against the wall. You had a $500,000 house in your hands and you let it go. How could you sign that life interest paper? Are you stupid? Brendan was sitting at the kitchen table, a beer in his hand, his face pale and sweaty. I didn't remember, Cassie, he stammered. Dad made me sign it years ago. He said it was to protect her from the taxes. Cherie, who was sitting on the balcony chain-smoking, walked into the living room. Protect her from us, you mean? And you, idiot, believed him. What about me? That house was mine too. You stole my share, Brendan. The atmosphere between the three was venomous. The alliance built on greed was quickly crumbling. Cassie stopped in front of Brendan. Her voice dropped to a dangerous hiss. Your mother humiliated us. That smiley old woman, Beth, the gossipy neighbor, they all laughed at us. And the money, the $200,000. Are you going to let that old woman keep the money your father stole from you, from your children? Brendan slammed the table. Dad didn't steal anything from me. It was his money. A glimpse of the man he should have been appeared for a second. Cherie stubbed out her cigarette on a dirty plate. Oh, don't start with the guilt, Brendan. You're pathetic enough as it is. The point is that those papers can't be legal. Dad was sick. That old woman manipulated him. Cassie nodded, seeing a new opportunity. Exactly. Your father had that heart scare. He wasn't in his right mind, and your mother, the little mouse, surely coerced him. We can fight this. With what money, Cassie? Brendan asked, his voice returning to despair. We can barely pay the rent for this place. Solicitors cost money. And Mom has Graham and Associates. Dad paid them for 5 years. Cassie smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. We don't need money. We're still going to go to a personal injury solicitor, one of those who only charges if they win, and we're going to sue. We're going to say Bruce wasn't mentally competent, Cherie added, and we'll ask for a psychological evaluation of her. We'll say she's senile, that she's spending the inheritance money irresponsibly, that she's putting the house at risk. The judge will have to intervene. The plan was cruel, designed to destroy Marjorie's credibility and paint her as an incapacitated elderly woman. Brendan looked at his wife and his sister. He saw the malice in their faces, but he was trapped. His debts were real. The promise of that money was the only way out he saw. All right, he finally said, lowering his gaze to his beer. Do what you have to do. But I'm not going to court. I can't look her in the face. Cassie laughed. We don't need you for that, Brendan. We just need your signature. You're the co-owner. We're going to destroy that life interest contract and freeze that bank account. The next day, Marjorie dressed in the best suit she had. It was a simple navy blue suit, the one she wore for weddings and baptisms. She felt nervous. Following Beth's advice, she decided to visit Graham and Associates solicitors in person. She wanted to see the faces of the men her husband had chosen as her protectors. The office was in a tall building downtown El Paso, with views of the Rio Bravo and Ciudad Juarez across the river. She was greeted by an older man, with silver hair and an impeccable suit. It was Mr. Graham, the principal partner. He led her into a large office, full of books and smelling of wood and leather. "Mrs. Marjorie, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said in a kind voice. "We are very sorry about Bruce. He was a good man, very forward-thinking, and sadly, he was right." He poured 2 cups of water. "Right about what?" Marjorie asked. Mr. Graham sighed. "Look, madam, what I'm about to tell you is protected by solicitor-client privilege, but since you are now the executor of his wishes, I believe you should know. 5 years ago, after his first heart problem, Bruce came to see us. He was distraught, distressed." Marjorie leaned forward, her heart pounding. "He told us that he was resting in his room, recovering," Mr. Graham continued, "and he overheard his daughter-in-law, Cassie, talking to his daughter, Cherie, in the kitchen. They didn't know he was awake. They were talking about how convenient it would be if he died soon. They talked about how much the house was worth and how you, Mrs. Marjorie, were a hindrance to their plans." Marjorie held her breath. The pain was so sharp she almost screamed. "The worst part," the solicitor said, "was when he heard Cassie planning. When the old man is gone," she said, "we'll convince Brendan to sell this dump and stick the old woman in a cheap retirement home, one on the other side of town. That way we won't even have to visit her." Marjorie closed her eyes. So that was the truth. It wasn't just the house. It was her freedom. They wanted to lock her up. Bruce had overheard the plan to get rid of her. "That very day," Mr. Graham said, "Bruce hired us. I want to protect my wife," he told us, "but I don't want to destroy my family. I don't want her to know how cruel her children are. That's why we devised the plan. We gave them the house title so they would feel like winners, but we created the life interest, which you also had to sign. But we gave it to Brendan, saying it was just a tax paper for his mother's protection, and he signed it without reading it." "And the mortgage? The money?" Marjorie asked. "That was his idea," the solicitor smiled. "Bruce said, 'My wife will need ammunition.' He took out the value of the house and put it in a separate account in your name, legally protected. That money is yours, madame, for your defense, for your repairs, for living. And yes, as he predicted, this morning we received the first notification. Your daughter Cherie and your daughter-in-law Cassie are going to challenge the life interest. They are alleging Bruce's mental incompetence." Marjorie stood up. The news, instead of scaring her, filled her with a cold anger. "They weren't talking about my husband's incompetence. They were talking about theirs. Mr. Graham, I want you to fight, not for the money, not for the house. I want you to fight for the truth. I want the oath my son made to his father to be respected." The solicitor stood up and shook her hand. "Mrs. Marjorie, it will be an honor. Bruce paid for this fight for 5 years. Now we're going to give it to them." The following weeks were a legal hell. Papers arrived almost daily. Notifications, summons, petitions. Cherie and Cassie had found a solicitor as ruthless as they were, one who worked with a scorched earth strategy. They immediately filed a motion to freeze the $200,000 account, alleging they were marital funds that Marjorie had no right to use alone. The judge, as a precaution, temporarily froze half the money, leaving Marjorie with limited access. "They're trying to drown us," Beth said, reading the last letter. "They want you to run out of money to pay Graham." Marjorie sat on the porch, rocking. There were days when the tension was unbearable. "I know what they're doing. It's Cassie's tactic, cutting off resources. But they don't know that Mr. Graham is already paid. Bruce took care of that." Even so, the feeling of siege was constant. The worst came later. The main lawsuit alleged that Bruce suffered from senile dementia in his later years, and that Marjorie, taking advantage of his condition, had forced him to create the life interest and the secret account. It was a lie so vile, so opposed to the truth, that Marjorie felt sick reading it. The lawsuit was signed by Brendan and Cherie. Cassie's name didn't appear, but her fingerprints were all over it. "They're calling your husband a liar, Marjorie," Beth said angrily. "They're staining his memory to get money." Marjorie closed her eyes. She remembered Bruce in his final days, clear-headed, strong, worried about her. "I won't let them do it. I won't let them rewrite who he was." She got up from the rocking chair. "Beth, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to take me to the Café del Sol." The cafe was the place where Bruce met his friends every morning. A group of retirees, other carpenters, veterans, men who knew him better than anyone. When Marjorie entered, the place fell silent. Everyone knew what her children had done to her. She approached the table where they sat. "Good morning," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I know you all loved my husband. Today I've come to ask for your help. His children are saying he was mad, that I manipulated him." An older man, Old Man Ted, Bruce's best friend, slammed his fist on the table. "That's an outrage. Bruce was the sharpest man I've ever known. I was with him the day before he died. We talked politics, baseball. He was sounder in the head than all of us put together." The other men nodded. "Marjorie, whatever you need," another one said. "We'll be witnesses. We'll go to court. We'll tell the judge what kind of man Bruce was and what kind of children he raised." Marjorie felt a lump in her throat. "I just want you to tell the truth, to defend his memory." Old Man Ted stood up and put a hand on her shoulder. "Bruce always told us, if anything happens to me, look after my little Marjorie. It seems he knew this day would come. Don't worry, love. This isn't just your fight anymore. It's the fight of everyone who loved him." Marjorie left the cafe feeling a small army marching with her. The legal battle filtered into the community. El Paso, though a big city, has neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone, and Marjorie's story became the talk of the town. At first, sympathies were divided. Some, influenced by the rumors Cassie spread at the children's school, believed Marjorie was an evil stepmother who had stolen the inheritance. But the truth, as always, began to surface. Mrs. O'Malley was the first to speak up. In the corner shop she heard two women whispering, "Poor Cherie. Her mother kicked her out of her own house." Mrs. O'Malley couldn't contain herself. "Excuse me for butting in," she said loudly, making everyone in the vegetable aisle turn around. "I saw what happened. I saw that very Cherie and her sister-in-law kick Marjorie onto the street like a dog the day of her husband's funeral, with one suitcase. I saw her, so don't come telling tales." The silence was total. The news spread like wildfire. Old Man Ted and Bruce's friends told the story at the cafe, the barber shop, the church. They told how Bruce, fearing his children's greed, had prepared everything to protect his wife. Suddenly, the narrative changed. Marjorie was no longer the helpless victim or the evil witch. She was a woman being attacked for the second time. The community, the real family, began to close ranks around her. Marjorie felt the change. When she went to the supermarket, people smiled at her. The butcher gave her an extra cut of meat. "It's on the house, Mrs. Marjorie." The young man bagging her groceries insisted on carrying the bags to her car. "My grandfather knew Bruce," he told her. "He said he was a man of honor." They were small gestures, but to Marjorie they meant the world. They meant her husband's truth was winning. And if this story has touched your heart so far, if you believe in justice and the strength of a woman defending the memory of her love, please leave us your like. It helps us a lot to keep telling these stories. And stay until the end, because what Cherie and Cassie do next will chill your blood. While the community supported her, her children became isolated. Cherie, who always boasted about her important family, now found that party invitations dried up. People looked at her with contempt at the shopping center. Brendan, at his work, heard his colleagues whispering, "That's the one who tried to steal his mother's house." The social pressure was immense, but for Cassie this only increased her rage. "Look at them, all those gossipy old people," she told Brendan one night. "They think she's a saint, they think we're the bad guys, and all because of an old house and some money that belongs to us." The shame, instead of leading them to repentance, entrenched them further in their hatred. One day Marjorie received a call. It was from her grandchildren's school. "Mrs. Marjorie, your grandchildren Liam and Chloe are here. They say their mom didn't come to pick them up, and we only have you as an emergency contact." Marjorie's heart stopped. Cassie had erased her from the list, but the school still had the old papers. "I'm on my way," Marjorie said, her hands trembling. She knew it wasn't an accident. It was the next move in Cassie's cruel game. Marjorie drove to the primary school, her mind racing. Why would Cassie do this? Leave her own children stranded? Liam, 8 years old, and Chloe, 6. They ran towards her as soon as they saw her. "Grandma! Grandma!" they cried. Chloe clung to her leg, crying. "I thought Mummy had forgotten us." Liam tried to be brave, but his eyes were full of fear. "Mum and Dad were fighting a lot this morning, Grandma." Marjorie hugged them, her heart breaking for them. "Don't worry, my loves. Grandma is here. I won't leave you alone." The school secretary looked at her with relief. "We called their mother and father. Both phones go straight to voicemail." Marjorie knew it was deliberate. Cassie was using the children. She wanted to show that Marjorie couldn't care for them, or worse, force her into a desperate situation. "I'll take them to my house," Marjorie said firmly. As the children ate biscuits in her kitchen, the same kitchen their parents had wanted to destroy, Marjorie felt she was at a crossroads. She loved those children. They were the only good thing left of her connection to Brendan. But she knew Cassie was playing games. Just then, her phone rang. It was Cherie. "So you took the kids, huh?" Cherie said, her voice mocking. "That's called kidnapping, Mum. Cassie is hysterical. She's calling the police." "Kidnapping?" Marjorie replied, her voice icy. "The school called me. Their parents abandoned them. I'm on the emergency list. Where's Cassie?" Cherie laughed. "Wherever she is not your problem, but if you don't return those children in 10 minutes, you're going to be in very big trouble. A judge won't look kindly on a child kidnapper who claims to be mentally stable." It was a trap. A perfect trap. Marjorie looked at Liam and Chloe, who were watching her with big, scared eyes. If she called the police, Cassie would say it was a misunderstanding. If she kept the children, they would accuse her of kidnapping. If she took them back to the empty apartment, she couldn't do that. She took a deep breath. "Tell Cassie to call her solicitor, and for her solicitor to call mine. The children are staying with me until a responsible parent comes to pick them up, with a police officer present." She hung up the phone. She was trembling, but she knew she had done the right thing. She called Mr. Graham. "Mrs. Marjorie, it's a trap," he told her immediately. "They want to provoke you. They want you to look unstable or malicious. You did well. I'll call the El Paso Police Department and Social Services. I'll report that the children are safe with you, but that the parents abandoned them and are now making threats. We'll turn this around. They are the irresponsible ones." That afternoon, a police officer and a social worker arrived at Marjorie's house. They saw the children, safe, fed, and playing in the garden. The social worker, a kind woman, spoke with Marjorie. "They filed a complaint saying you retained the children," she said. Marjorie explained the situation calmly. "I love my grandchildren, but their mother is using them as weapons in an inheritance dispute." Half an hour later, Cassie and Brendan appeared, feigning panic. "My children! Oh my God, my children!" Cassie screamed. But the social worker stopped her. "Madame, we understand you didn't answer the school's calls and then threatened the grandmother." Cassie's face changed from fake panic to rage. Brendan was behind her, unable to look his mother or his children in the eye. Cassie's plan had failed. Instead of making Marjorie look bad, she had exposed herself as a negligent mother. The social services visit was a deep wound for the family, or what was left of it. The social worker issued a severe report on Cassie and Brendan's neglect. Although the children returned with them that night, a file was now open. Cassie's strategy of using the children as pawns had blown up in her own face. The judge overseeing the inheritance case was notified of the incident, which greatly weakened their position. Marjorie felt empty after the children left. The house was too quiet. Beth came to sit with her that night. "It was the cruelest thing they could do," Marjorie said, wiping away a tear, "using Liam and Chloe's innocence." Beth hugged her. "But they didn't win, Marjorie. You proved to them that you're not a victim. You're a protector. You're a real grandmother." In the following days, Marjorie decided to channel her pain into action. She looked at the bank account. Despite the partial freeze, she still had access to significant funds. "Bruce wanted me to live, Beth, not just fight." The next day, she hired a team of gardeners. The garden, which had been neglected during Bruce's last year of illness and Marjorie's mourning, was full of weeds. "I want you to clean it all up," she told them, "and I want to plant yellow roses." They were Bruce's favorites. Working in the garden was healing. The sound of the clippers, the smell of fresh earth, the color of the new flowers. Marjorie went out every morning with her coffee and directed the workers. Mrs. O'Malley brought her lemonade. Old Man Ted and his friends dropped by and offered to repair the backyard fence. The house, which had been a battleground, began to feel like a sanctuary again. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. Cherie, driving past to spy, saw the flourishing garden and felt a pang of rage. "Look at that! She's spending our money on stupid flowers," she yelled at Cassie over the phone. "The solicitor said she couldn't touch the money." Cassie was even more furious. The social services report had put Brendan at risk of losing his job as his boss found out about the incident. "That money is for the maintenance of the house, idiot," Cassie screamed. "That's what her solicitor will say. She's playing games with us." But the truth was that Marjorie's strategy, though unintentional, was brilliant. She was demonstrating responsible custodianship of the property. She was investing in it. While they tried to destroy her, she was building. One afternoon, while watering the new roses, Marjorie saw Liam, her grandson, standing on the pavement. He was alone. Her heart skipped a beat. "Liam, my love, what are you doing here? Where's your mum?" Liam approached slowly, his broken trainers dragging on the ground. "I ran away," he whispered. "I don't want to live with them anymore, Grandma. Mum and Dad just yell. Dad is drinking again. And Mum said she wished you'd die soon, so we could have this house." Marjorie dropped the hose. The horror of the words left her breathless. She knelt down and hugged her grandson. He was trembling. "I don't want to be there anymore, Grandma. Can I stay with you?" Marjorie hugged him tightly. Oh, my boy. She knew she was at another impossible crossroads. If she kept him, Cassie would accuse her again. If she returned him, she was sending him back to a toxic home. This time the decision was even harder. Marjorie took Liam inside and made him a glass of chocolate milk. The boy drank in silence, his eyes scanning the house he vaguely remembered. "Grandma, is it true that this house is yours?" he asked. Marjorie sat down opposite him. "It's complicated, my love. But yes, it's my home, and Grandpa Bruce made sure I could stay here forever." Liam nodded. "Mum said you lied to Dad. She said you made him sign bad papers." Marjorie's heart sank. "And what do you think, Liam?" The boy shrugged. "I think Mum lies a lot. She lies to Dad about the shopping money, and she lies to you." Marjorie knew she had to do the right thing no matter how painful. "Liam, I love you more than anything in the world. But you can't run away. Your mum and Dad will be very scared. I have to call them. But this time we'll do it differently." She called Mr. Graham first. "I have my grandson here. He ran away from home. He says the atmosphere is toxic and his father is drinking." Mr. Graham was clear. "Marjorie, this is serious. You can't keep him, but you also shouldn't hand him over if you believe he's in danger. Call the social worker, the same one who handled your case last time. Report what the boy told you. Now they are the ones under the microscope, not you." Marjorie made the call. The social worker, Miss Nguyen, sounded concerned. "Thank you for calling, Mrs. Marjorie. Keep him. I'm coming over there right now, and I'll call the parents to meet me at your house." An hour later, Miss Nguyen was in Marjorie's lounge, talking softly with Liam. The boy, feeling safe, told her everything. The fights, Cassie's shouting, his father's silence, and the fear he felt for his little sister, Chloe. Meanwhile, in Brendan's apartment, Miss Nguyen's call was like a bomb. "He ran away," Cassie screamed. "That old woman kidnapped him. She lured him to her house with sweets. I'm going to kill her." Brendan, who was on the sofa with a hangover, finally reacted. "Shut up, Cassie. The boy ran away because of you, because of the shouting, because of what you told him about my mother." Guilt and rage finally broke through his apathy. "My fault," Cassie scoffed. "It's your fault for being a coward, a drunk who can't defend his family." The two started screaming, a fight so loud that the neighbors called the building management. They didn't notice when Miss Nguyen and two police officers knocked on their door. When they opened it, the fight stopped abruptly. The apartment was a mess. Chloe was hiding in a cupboard, crying. Miss Nguyen looked at the chaos, the empty bottles, and then at Cassie and Brendan, both disheveled and bloodshot. "Sir and Madam, I regret to inform you that, based on your son's testimony and what I'm seeing here, I'm going to take emergency custody of both children." Cassie gasped. "No, you can't do that. It's my mother-in-law's fault." But it was too late. The police entered. "Brendan," Miss Nguyen said calmly, "your mother saved your son today. He went to the only person he felt he could trust. You should think about that." That night, Liam and Chloe didn't sleep in the chaotic apartment. They slept in a safe temporary home while the system decided the next step. Cassie's war for money had cost her the only thing that truly mattered, her own children. The news that Liam and Chloe had been placed in temporary state custody was a devastating blow to everyone. For Marjorie, it was a nightmare. She had wanted to protect her grandson, and now he and his sister were in the hands of strangers. "Mr. Graham, I have to do something," she pleaded over the phone. "They're my grandchildren. I can look after them." The solicitor sighed. "Marjorie, right now, you are part of the dispute. The judge won't give them to you while the inheritance case is open. Cassie will argue you're using them." "But she's the one who used them," Marjorie cried. "I know, and Miss Nguyen knows," Mr. Graham consoled her. "But the system is slow. For now, they're safe. That's what matters. We have the inheritance hearing in 2 weeks, and trust me, this changes everything. Cassie and Cherie's credibility is rock bottom." Marjorie hung up, feeling more alone than ever. She walked through her flourishing garden, But the yellow roses no longer brought her joy. Meanwhile, the loss of the children shattered Brendan. The silence in the apartment was deafening. There was no more shouting from Cassie, who was now locked in the bedroom, in a catatonic silence. Brendan walked through the empty apartment. He saw Chloe's toys, Liam's drawing on the refrigerator, all the money, all the house, all the rage. None of it mattered. He had lost his children, and he knew exactly why. Because of his weakness, because of his greed. He picked up his car keys. "I'm going out," he said to the closed bedroom door. There was no reply. He drove aimlessly through the pass, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. He stopped in front of a bottle shop. He was about to go in, but then the image of his father came to mind. "Swear it to me, Brendan." And the image of Liam saying, "Dad is drinking again." He turned the wheel sharply and drove away from the shop. He drove to the house, his childhood home, his mother's house. He parked across the street. He saw the lights on. He saw his mother, a solitary silhouette, rocking on the porch. He sat there for an hour, then two. The rage towards her had dissipated, replaced by a wave of shame, so profound he could barely breathe. He realized his father wasn't just protecting Marjorie from him. He was trying to protect him from himself. And he had failed. Finally, he got out of the car. He crossed the street slowly. Marjorie looked up. She saw her son approaching. Her first instinct was to run inside and lock the door with the new locks. But she stayed put. He stopped at the foot of the porch stairs. He couldn't look her in the eyes. "Mom," his voice choked. "I lost my children." Marjorie didn't say anything. She just looked at him. The silence was heavy, filled with years of disappointment. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered, and finally broke down. He fell to his knees on the lawn, the same lawn where he had stood silently while Cherie kicked her out. "I'm sorry, for everything, for the house, for the money, for Dad, for my children. I ruined everything." And he began to cry, not the crying of a frustrated man, but the broken crying of a lost boy. Marjorie stood up from the rocking chair. She walked to the edge of the porch and looked at her kneeling son. "Get up, Brendan," she said. Her voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was the voice of a judge. "Kneeling won't fix anything." He looked up, his face bathed in tears. "I don't know what to do, Cassie." "I can't fix your life, Brendan," Marjorie interrupted him. "I can't save your marriage. And right now, I don't even know if I can save my grandchildren. But if you really mean it, if you really want to honor your father, there's one thing you can do." He looked at her desperately. "What?" "Tell the truth." Brendan looked at her confused. "The truth?" Marjorie nodded. "The hearing is in 2 weeks. Your sister and your wife are going to stand in front of a judge and they are going to lie. They are going to say your father was mad. They are going to say I manipulated him. They are going to stain his memory to get money. Money that already cost them their children. You were there. You signed the paper. You gave your word to your father. Tell the truth, Brendan." He fell silent, processing the request. "But Mom, Cassie, she's my wife. Cherie is my sister. If I do that, I'll destroy them. I'll lose my wife." Marjorie looked at him with infinite sadness. "You already lost your children. You already lost your honor. You already lost your father's respect. What else do you have left to lose, Brendan? Sometimes to rebuild something, you have to finish demolishing what is rotten." She turned around and walked into the house, leaving the door open as an invitation and a choice. Brendan stayed in the garden for a long time as the sun set. He saw his father's yellow roses. He saw the window of his old bedroom. He made a decision. He got up and walked towards the house. He went in. Marjorie was in the kitchen making dinner. "Are you hungry?" she asked without looking at him. "I haven't eaten anything," he replied. That night, for the first time in years, mother and son sat at the table in silence. They didn't talk about court. They didn't talk about Cassie. They talked about Bruce. They talked about summers at the lake. They talked about the time Brendan broke his arm. It was a slow trickle of memories, a tentative attempt to find common ground. When he left late that night, nothing was resolved. But something had changed. The following days were a torture of silence. Brendan returned to his apartment. Cassie and Cherie prepared their testimony, full of venom and lies. "You'll say your mother threatened you," Cassie instructed him, "that she told you if you didn't sign the life interest, she'd tell your father you were stealing." Brendan just nodded, his eyes empty. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Old Man Ted and Bruce's friends were there. Mrs. O'Malley was there. Beth sat next to Marjorie. Across the aisle were Cherie and Cassie, dressed in black. Feigning mourning, Brendan was between them, pale as a ghost. Cassie's solicitor went first, painting Marjorie as a cruel manipulator. Cherie took the stand and cried crocodile tears. My mother changed after Dad got sick. She became controlling. She isolated him. We only wanted to protect my father's legacy. It was a performance worthy of a soap opera. Marjorie remained impassive, looking straight ahead. Then they called Brendan. Cassie squeezed his hand. Remember what we practiced? For your children. Brendan walked to the stand. He swore to tell the truth. Cassie's solicitor began. Sir, is it true that your mother forced you to sign documents you didn't understand? Brendan looked at Cassie. Then he looked at his mother. And finally, he looked at the judge. He took a deep breath. No, sir, that's not true. The silence in the courtroom was so thick you could cut it. Cassie's eyes were daggers plunged into her husband's back. Her visibly surprised solicitor repeated the question. Excuse me, sir. I believe you misunderstood. Is it true or not that your mother forced you? Brendan swallowed, his knuckles white from gripping the edge of the stand. No, sir, my mother didn't force anyone. The truth is that we deceived her. A murmur ran through the gallery. The judge pounded the gavel. Silence. Continue, sir. Brendan looked at the judge, avoiding his wife's gaze. My father, he had a health scare 5 years ago. After that, my wife, Cassie, convinced me that we should secure the house. She said my mother wasn't good with money. Marjorie's solicitor, Mr. Graham, leaned back in his chair, letting the man destroy himself alone. Then, Brendan continued, his voice gaining a shaky strength. My father put my sister and me as owners of the title, but he took me aside. He made me sign another paper. He told me, this is your mother's life interest. This house is hers as long as she breathes. Swear it to me, Brendan. Swear you'll respect this. And I swore it to him. Marjorie closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks. It was the first time she had heard confirmation of his oath. And what happened to that oath? Cassie's solicitor asked, trying to salvage the situation. You honored your father. Brendan shook his head, shame burning his face. No, I didn't. The day of my father's funeral, my sister Cherie and my wife Cassie kicked my mother out of the house with one suitcase. They yelled at her, they humiliated her, and I stayed silent. I let them do it. Objection, the solicitor shouted. Irrelevant, denied, the judge replied. I want to hear this, Brendan continued, the truth pouring out in torrents. And the plan to say my father was mad was Cassie and Cherie's idea. My father was perfectly sound in the head. He was smarter than all of us. He knew what we were planning. He knew we were going to betray him. The testimony was a bomb. Cherie rose from her seat. Liar, you're a liar. She's manipulating you. That old woman brainwashed you. The judge pounded the gavel furiously. Madame, sit down and be quiet, or I will have you removed from my courtroom. One more outburst and you will spend the night in jail for contempt. Cherie sat down, trembling with rage. Brendan concluded. My wife and my sister planned everything. They planned to kick her out. They planned to challenge the will. They planned to put her in a home. He turned towards Marjorie and for the first time looked her in the eyes. And I'm a coward for allowing it, but not anymore. The house is my mother's. The money is my mother's. Everything belongs to her. I don't want anything. I just want my father to forgive me. Chaos erupted. Cassie lunged at the railing separating the gallery from the court. You idiot, you traitor, you just ruined your family. You ruined us. Bailiffs grabbed her before she could get any further. You're dead to me, Brendan. Do you hear me? Dead. The judge ordered Cassie to be removed from the courtroom. She left screaming and cursing, her mask of respectability completely shattered. Cherie was paralyzed in her seat, her face pale with shock. Her own brother had betrayed them. Their perfect plan had collapsed. The judge looked at Cherie. Do you have anything to say about your brother's testimony? About the plan to put your mother in a home? Cherie looked around. She saw Old Man Ted, Mrs. O'Malley. She saw the contempt on their faces. She didn't say anything. She just shook her head, defeated. Mr. Graham stood up. Your Honor, we have no further questions for this witness. Brendan stepped down from the stand and instead of sitting with his sister, he crossed the aisle and sat on the bench behind his mother, alone. It was a symbolic act that sealed his decision. He no longer belonged on that side of the room. Marjorie's solicitor then called his witnesses. Old Man Ted took the stand and spoke eloquently about Bruce's lucidity. That man negotiated the sale of my ute a week before he died, Your Honor, and got me a better price than the dealership. Mad, he was a genius. Mrs. O'Malley testified about the scene in the garden, confirming Cherie's cruelty and Brendan's passivity. Finally, Mr. Graham presented the last piece of evidence, the full social services report. Your Honor, the opposition has tried to paint my client, Mrs. Marjorie, as unstable, but this report shows a pattern of neglect, manipulation, and a toxic environment created by Cassie and Cherie. It shows they used innocent children as weapons in this dispute. It shows who is truly unstable here. Cassie and Cherie's solicitor stood up. Your Honor, my client. The judge raised a hand. Sit down, counsel. I believe I have heard enough. I have heard perjury. I have heard a confession of conspiracy to commit fraud, and I have seen a moral and ethical abuse that disgusts me. I will take a 15-minute recess, and then I will give my verdict. The 15 minutes felt like an eternity. Marjorie was trembling. Beth squeezed her hand tightly. Brendan still sat behind them, his head in his hands. Cherie had left the room, furious. When the judge returned, the courtroom was in complete silence. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked directly to where Cassie had been sitting. This court rarely sees such a clear-cut case of greed and malice. First, the judge said, regarding the motion to challenge the life interest, based on the overwhelming testimony of Old Man Ted, the confession of the co-owner himself, Brendan, and the total lack of evidence from the plaintiff, the motion is denied. Mrs. Marjorie's life interest on the property in question is valid, legal, and irrevocable. Marjorie released a sigh she had been holding for weeks. Second, the judge continued, the motion to freeze the funds in Mrs. Marjorie's bank account is likewise denied. Those funds were legally secured by her late husband as protection. The remaining funds will be released to Mrs. Marjorie immediately. Old Man Ted and Beth applauded softly until the judge looked at them. Third, the judge said, his voice turning severe. This court finds that the actions of Mrs. Cassie and Miss Cherie were not only morally reprehensible but bordered on the criminal. The attempt to present false testimony about Bruce's mental competence is perjury. The attempt to use innocent children to manipulate this court and their grandmother is despicable. And finally, he said, looking at Brendan, you, sir, are a man who has failed in every duty, as a son, as a husband, and as a father. However, your 11th-hour confession is the only thing that saves you from a perjury investigation. I advise you to use this second chance to reevaluate your entire life. The judge pounded the gavel. Case closed. Marjorie sat still, crying silently. Beth hugged her. It was over. She had won. Mr. Graham approached and patted her on the shoulder. We won, Marjorie. Bruce won. Marjorie looked up and looked at her solicitor. Thank you. Thank you for honoring my husband. Outside the room, the local press, who had been alerted to the family drama, waited. Marjorie walked out, surrounded by Beth and Mr. Graham. She didn't say anything, but her face said it all. Old Man Ted and his friends formed a protective barrier between her and the cameras. A few meters back, Cherie ran out, covering her face. This is your fault, she yelled at Brendan, who was leaving behind her. You ruined everything. You're a weakling, a traitor. He looked at her, his eyes dead. It's over, Cherie. Go home. Cherie looked at him with hatred. I don't have a home anymore, and you don't have a sister. She ran off down the hallway. Brendan was left alone in the courthouse corridor. He saw his mother in the distance, being congratulated by her friends. She looked at him for a second. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a deep sadness. She turned and walked away. He was alone. His wife was gone. His sister hated him. His children were in the system. And all for money, for a house he never really wanted. He walked out onto the courthouse steps. The El Paso sun seemed too bright. He had nowhere to go. The rental apartment belonged to Cassie. His car belonged to Cassie. He sat down on the marble steps, the same place where lawyers smoked cigars and celebrated victories. He only felt the most absolute defeat of his life. The judge was right. He had failed at everything. Meanwhile, Cassie was in the car park, in her car, hitting the steering wheel. Idiot, 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 she screamed. Her phone rang. It was her solicitor. Madame, I advise you to prepare yourself. The judge has sent his verdict along with the social services report to the family court. The custody hearing for your children will be next week, and frankly, it doesn't look good. Cassie threw the phone against the windscreen. Marjorie arrived home. The silence greeted her like an old friend. She walked through the rooms, her lounge, her kitchen, her bedroom. Everything was hers. She saw the yellow roses in the garden, blooming under the sun. She sat down in Bruce's armchair, and for the first time since his death, she didn't cry. She felt peace, a cold, hard-won peace, but peace at last. She called Miss Nguyen, the social worker. Miss Nguyen, it's Marjorie. The inheritance trial just ended. I won. The judge validated my house and my funds. Miss Nguyen sighed in relief. Congratulations, Mrs. Marjorie. That helps. It helps a lot. I'm going to file a motion tomorrow. Given that Cassie has proven to be manipulative and unstable, and Brendan is homeless, I will apply for temporary custody for you as the most stable and suitable relative. Marjorie's heart skipped a beat. Really? Do you think the judge will approve it? I do, Miss Nguyen said. You proved yourself a protector, and those children love you. Get ready, Marjorie. Your grandchildren might be coming home. Marjorie hung up the phone, and this time she did cry. But they were tears of a hope she had thought dead. The custody hearing was a somber formality. Cassie showed up, but her rage had been replaced by a defeated apathy. Her solicitor tried to argue that Marjorie was too old to care for two young children, but Miss Nguyen presented her report, detailing Marjorie's stability, her safe home, and the evident love the children had for her. She also detailed Liam's flight and his words. Mom said she wished you'd die soon. Brendan was there too. He had shaved and was wearing a suit. His solicitor, a public defender, spoke for him. Your Honor, my client knows he has failed. He's not asking for custody. He's asking for help. He is enrolled in an alcohol rehabilitation program. He has found an entry-level job at a hardware store. He only asks for supervised visitation. He wants to get his children back, but he knows he has to get himself back first. The judge looked at everyone in the room. This case is a tragedy driven by greed. He looked at Cassie. You, madame, have put money above the welfare of your children. You have lost custody. You will have supervised visits, conditional on a full psychological evaluation. Then he looked at Brendan. You, sir, are taking the first step. I acknowledge that. You will have supervised visits through your mother. Finally, he looked at Marjorie. Mrs. Marjorie, you did not ask for this burden. You are also a victim in this, but you are the only person who has acted in the best interest of these children. I grant you full temporary custody of Liam and Chloe. Marjorie broke down in tears. Beth beside her hugged her. The battle was over. Her grandchildren were coming home. That afternoon, Miss Nguyen brought Liam and Chloe to the house. When they saw Marjorie, they ran to her. Grandma! The three hugged on the porch, crying. You're home, Marjorie whispered. You're home, my loves. No one is going to hurt you anymore. Liam looked at the garden. Are those Grandpa's roses? Marjorie nodded. Yes, and now they're ours. Life in the house changed. It was no longer silent. It was full of laughter, of running through the hallways, of arguments about homework. It was difficult. Marjorie was 72, and the energy of an 8-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl was overwhelming. But Beth helped. Mrs. O'Malley brought biscuits. Old Man Ted taught Liam and Chloe how to play checkers on the porch. The community that had protected Marjorie now helped raise her grandchildren. Brendan began his Sunday visits. At first, they were awkward. He sat on the porch, sober and nervous, playing with Liam while Marjorie watched them from the window. Little by little, he started helping out. He fixed the fence that Beth and Marjorie had broken. He repaired the loose porch step. He did the carpentry work his father had taught him, work he had abandoned for years. One Sunday, 6 months later, he was helping Marjorie plant a new lemon tree. Mom, he said without looking at her, his hands sunk in the dirt. What I did to you wasn't because of debts. It was because of weakness. I always felt Cherie was stronger, that Cassie was smarter, and that Dad loved you more. I was a fool, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I broke my oath. Marjorie stopped digging. She looked at him. Your father loved you too, Brendan. He saw your weakness, yes, but he also saw your good heart. It's buried deep inside, but it's there. A year passed. Marjorie's house had been transformed. Yellow roses covered the front fence. The lemon tree she planted with Brendan was bearing its first fruits. Liam and Chloe were happy, noisy children who ran through the garden. Marjorie had used part of Bruce's money to build a small addition at the back, 2 new bedrooms for the children. It was a home full of life, built on the foundations of a love that had survived the grave. Brendan had completed a year of sobriety. He had a small but clean apartment near his work. He saw his children 3 times a week. He had recovered his confidence as a carpenter and was slowly regaining his mother's respect. The relationship was fragile, scarred by pain, but it was real. They talked about the children, the garden, and sometimes, just sometimes, about Bruce. Forgiveness was a slow process, but it had begun. Cassie had tried to comply with the supervised visits, but her rage and refusal to accept responsibility made the sessions toxic. She blamed the children for siding with the old woman. After a few months, a psychologist recommended suspending the visits for the children's emotional well-being. Cassie disappeared, moving out of El Paso, perhaps seeking a new life where her past couldn't reach her. Cherie also left. The El Paso community had become too small for her. She sold her things and moved to Houston, bitter and alone. She never called Marjorie, never asked about her brother or her niece and nephew. The money she thought she deserved had become a poison that had isolated her from everyone. Her greed had cost her the one thing money couldn't buy: a family. Marjorie, at 73, was busier than ever. She was a full-time mother again, but she wasn't alone. Beth was a co-grandmother, always present. Old man Ted and his friends were surrogate grandfather figures, teaching Liam to throw a ball and Chloe to fish. The house, which was once the target of a war, had become the center of a new family. A family forged not by blood, but by loyalty and love. One autumn afternoon, 2 years after Bruce's death, Marjorie sat on her porch rocking. Liam, now 10, read a book next to her. Chloe, 8, drew the yellow roses. Brendan was in the yard, sanding a small wooden chair he was building for Chloe. The El Paso sun was setting, painting the Franklin Mountains purple. The house phone rang. Marjorie went inside to answer it. It was Mr. Graham. "Marjorie, good news. The family court has issued the final ruling. Based on your continued stability, Brendan's sustained recovery, and the biological mother's total abandonment, the judge is granting you permanent custody of Liam and Chloe." Marjorie leaned against the wall, feeling the last weight of the world lift from her shoulders. "Thank you, Graham, for everything." She hung up the phone and looked out the kitchen window. She saw her son concentrated on his work, sanding the wood with the same care Bruce used to have. She saw her grandchildren, safe and at peace. She walked out to the porch. "Liam, Chloe, come here. Your dad and I have something to tell you." The children ran to her. Brendan approached, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Kids," Marjorie said, "the judge has said that this will be your permanent home, with me." "Hey." The children cheered and hugged her. "Yes, we're going to live here forever." Liam looked at his father. "And you, Dad, are you going to live here too?" Brendan smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "No, son, I have my own place, but I'll always visit. And one day, when I'm ready and when you want to, maybe you can come and stay the night at my place too." It was a new beginning. A broken family, reassembled in a different way. Marjorie looked at Brendan. "You did a good job with that chair, my son." He looked at her, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks, Mom. Dad taught me well." It was the first time in years they had mentioned Bruce without a shadow of pain or guilt. It was just a fact, a legacy of love and skill. That night, after the children fell asleep, Marjorie sat in her armchair. She took out the old metal box from the shed. Inside, only the photograph of her and Bruce, young and covered in paint, remained. She looked at it. "We did it, my love," she whispered. "We saved the house and we saved our son. We lost one, but we saved one, and you gave us these two angels. Your plan worked." She realized that Bruce hadn't just left the money and the papers. He had left a test for Brendan. He knew his son was weak, but he planted a seed of redemption. The oath, the confession. Bruce had bet that, deep down, his son's good heart would win. And although he took the most painful path, in the end, he won. Marjorie put the photo away, stood up, and went to tuck in her grandchildren. Tomorrow would be another day of school, homework, gardening, a normal life, a beautiful life, the life Bruce always wanted for her, the life she had reclaimed from the fire of betrayal, with strength, with dignity, and with the help of a love that not even death could stop. Life settled into a happy routine. Years passed. Liam and Chloe grew up, becoming smart and kind teenagers. Marjorie's house remained the anchor of their lives. The garden blossomed every spring with yellow roses, a constant reminder of the grandfather they never knew, but whose presence they felt in every corner of the house. Marjorie, now in her 80s, was still the fierce matriarch, though her steps were slower. Brendan remained sober, becoming a pillar in his children's lives. He never remarried, dedicating his life to his work as a carpenter and repairing the relationship with his family. The ghost of his past never fully erased itself, but it became a reminder of the grace he had been given, a second chance he didn't waste. He became the man his father always wanted him to be, Responsible, present, and loyal, he often sat with Marjorie on the porch in silence, simply enjoying the peace they had worked so hard to win. One day, Marjorie received a letter. It was from Houston. It had no return address, just an address. She opened it with trembling hands. It was from Cherie. It was only a few lines, written in shaky handwriting. Mom, I heard Cassie died last year. Liver disease. I'm alone. I don't ask for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that every day of my life I have regretted what I did. The money brought me nothing. I hope you are well. Marjorie read the letter several times. She didn't feel rage. She didn't feel triumph. She only felt a deep, overwhelming pity. The path of greed had ended exactly as it should, in loneliness and regret. She folded the letter and put it away. She looked at her grandchildren, now young adults, laughing in the kitchen. She looked at her son who was fixing a door hinge. That night, Marjorie showed the letter to Brendan. He read it in silence. "Are you going to answer her?" he asked. Marjorie shook her head. "No, there's nothing to say. She has to find her own peace, just as you found yours. Our life is here." He understood her. Cherie's wound was too deep to be healed with words. Marjorie had learned the hardest lesson of all, that family isn't always who you get by blood. Sometimes, family are the friends who open the door for you in the middle of the night, like Beth. Sometimes they are the neighbors who defend you at the shop, like Mrs. O'Malley. And sometimes, family is what's left after the fire has burned everything and you decide to rebuild on the ashes. The house in El Paso, once a symbol of greed and betrayal, had become a beacon of resilience, a testament that a husband's love could protect his wife even from the grave, and that a mother's strength could, in the end, redeem a lost son and raise a new generation. As the years passed, Beth and old man Ted passed away, followed by Mrs. O'Malley. Marjorie mourned each of them with the deep sorrow of one who loses a true family member. They had been her army in the darkest battle of her life. She attended their funerals not as a neighbor, but as a sister. She left yellow roses from her garden on their graves, a silent tribute to the loyalty they had shown her. Liam graduated from university and became a solicitor, inspired, he said in his speech, by a man I never knew, my grandfather who used the law to protect love, and by a woman who is everything to me, my grandmother, who taught me what justice truly means. He joined the firm of Graham and Associates, occupying a desk not far from where Mr. Graham, now retired, still told the story of Bruce as a firm legend. Chloe, with her grandmother's artistic spirit, became a landscape architect. Her thesis project was the restoration of the neighborhood's community gardens, a project she financed with a small part of the inheritance Marjorie insisted she and Liam receive. The yellow rose garden at Marjorie's house became a local landmark, a symbol of the community's tenacity. Brendan aged with dignity. He became the surrogate grandfather when Liam had his own children. He never stopped working with his hands. He taught carpentry at the community center, a quiet, kind man, known for his patience. The ghost of his past never completely faded, but it became a reminder of the grace he had been given, a second chance he didn't waste. Marjorie lived until she was 94. She died peacefully, in her own bed, in the house she had defended. She died surrounded by her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, and her son. The house was full of light and laughter, not shadows. She went to sleep one autumn afternoon, with the scent of yellow roses drifting through the window, and simply didn't wake up. At her funeral, the church was packed, not with distant relatives, but with the people of El Paso, whose lives she had touched. Liam gave the eulogy. My grandmother Marjorie was the strongest woman I have ever known. She survived pain, betrayal, and abandonment, but she never let it make her bitter. She taught us that a home is not the walls, but the loyalty that lives within them. And she taught us that true love never, ever dies. It just waits, hidden in a shed, for us to have the courage to find it. After the funeral, Brendan and his children returned to the house. According to Marjorie's will, the house would finally be sold, as Bruce had originally wanted, but Marjorie added a clause. I give my son Brendan the first option to buy, at a symbolic price of $1, because he has proven to be the son Bruce always knew he could be. Brendan, with tears in his eyes, accepted. The house was finally in the right hands. Brendan, now an old man, moved back into his childhood home. But he wasn't alone. Liam, Chloe, and their families filled it on weekends. The house was no longer a prize. It was a legacy. Brendan kept the shed exactly the same. The metal box was still embedded in the first wall, like a sanctuary. And the photograph of his parents, young and covered in paint, was now on the mantelpiece for everyone to see. The story of Marjorie and Bruce became a family legend, a cautionary tale about greed and a lesson about loyalty. It taught the new generations that money comes and goes, but the character, honor, and love you protect are eternal. It taught them that the hardest battles aren't fought against strangers, but sometimes, sadly, against those who should love you most. Marjorie didn't just reclaim her house, she reclaimed her son, raised her grandchildren, honored her husband's memory, and proved that, even in old age, abandoned and alone, a person can find a strength they didn't know they had. The strength to fight, the strength to forgive, and the strength to rebuild. Her life was a testament that true wealth is not measured in property, but in the peace you find at the end of the road. And so, on a quiet El Paso street, the House of Yellow Roses still stands. It is no longer the house of the abandoned widow, but the house of the victorious matriarch. A home built not only with bricks and wood, but with Bruce's indomitable love and Marjorie's unbreakable strength. Bruce's love was a true master plan, protecting Marjorie even after his passing. If this story of loyalty and justice has moved you, please comment the word loyalty below. We want to know how many of you believe that true love lasts forever. And don't forget to subscribe to Momentos Escritos and leave your like if you want to see more exciting stories like Marjorie's. Stories that remind us that, even in the darkest night, there is always a hidden light waiting to be found.